Hello and welcome back to another episode of Inside the Asperger Studios. Are you someone looking for a neurodivergent coach? Someone who's understanding and who can help you guide you through your life? Well, my next guest is a neurodivergent coach who uses a sliding scale in her business. We'll talk more about that scale, her clients, and the struggles she sees with her clients, and so much more. So sit back, relax, and grab your favorite beverage, and I'll see you on the other side. See you there.
I wanna believe in the truth, but only see what I'm shown. Got the freedom to choose, but can't decide on my own. Follow what the group is thinking, bottle up my intuition till it's popping up. Thanks, Reed.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Inside the Asperger Studios. Today I'm joined with my very good friend, Danielle Sullivan, who is a neurodivergent coach. Welcome to the show, Danielle.
Thanks for having me back on. I'm happy to be here.
So why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name's Danielle Sullivan. I am the host over at the Neurodivergent podcast, and I run Neurodivergent Coaching, which is a coaching practice. We're entirely virtual online, and we are neurodivergent coaches serving neurodivergent clients, mostly late identified autistic ADHD folks, but we serve a wide variety of different kinds of people with life coaching, parent coaching, positive psychology, skills building, that kind of stuff.
All right. So when did this practice start?
Let's see. I started the podcast in 2020 when I was late identified autistic. And so I started the podcast to try to like find people who were like me. And then probably around 2022, I started coaching because I started getting like a lot of questions from people who were listening to the podcast. And I did not have the skills at that time to support. But also I have two kiddos who are neurodivergent. And just as a parent, I was floundering a little bit with figuring out how to support them best, and learning coaching really got me on the right track in supporting them really well. And so, yeah, we probably started in 2022 or 2021, maybe 2021, I'm going to say. And I should have looked at a timeline before I got on this podcast.
All right.
My computer just did something. I'm really sorry. There we go. Okay.
All right.
And then around, let's see, it is January 2024. So in September 2023, for whatever reason, and I couldn't tell you why, we kind of blew up. Like we're not like Microsoft blew up, but like we got really busy and I couldn't support everyone who was coming in. And so we moved from being just me to having a whole suite of coaches who are all neurodivergent professional adults, many with a lot more experience coaching than I have actually, and now have been able to serve a lot more people, which has just been really fantastic. So yeah, that's in a nutshell our journey.
So how did you choose your coaches?
That's a good question. Well, the first thing I really did was look for other neurodivergent adults, and especially late identified, because those are most of the folks who come in our doors looking for support, are people who just got a diagnosis or self-identified and are kind of like minds blown a little
Mhm.
bit of trying to figure out, well, what does this mean for me? What changes do I need to make for my life? What kind of supports do I need? Do I need accommodations at work? All these kinds of questions. And then looking for folks who really seem to understand the neurodiversity paradigm of this idea that um, there's nothing wrong or bad or incorrect about being neurodivergent, but that you might have different strengths or different weaknesses, or you might have skills gaps, like you just never were explicitly taught a thing. Because neurotypical people, maybe, for example, I was never explicitly taught social skills. I had to like learn them badly and do them badly for many years. Neurotypical social skills, I mean, not like autistic social skills I'm good at. But I had to explicitly learn neurotypical social skills and then um, sometimes teach those to other people who are having to engage with neurotypical people at the workplace or whatever, right? And so that's not my fault or anyone else's fault for not knowing that. We weren't taught that stuff. And so trying to find coaches who understood that this isn't like, who are coming from a neurodiversity affirming perspective of this is not bad or wrong. This is just how humans are. And we're going to support the humans that we interact with day to day, which is harder to find than I wish it were, because I think it's really common for us to have internalized ableism and shame and
Mhm.
feelings that we're not good enough. And even in coaches who have been working for a long time, that's the case. So, yeah. And then just finding people who are really good at what they do, who have a lot of really good communication skills, community building skills, coalition building skills, who are self advocates and know how to teach self advocacy and know how to collaborate with their clients. Because we're not like therapists or doctors where we're like the expert. We're collaborating. We're like asking you what you need and following you on your journey and supporting you on your journey. We're not really interested in like leading you somewhere. So finding coaches who can support that really well and kind of be with the client
Hmm.
was the most important thing for me.
That seems to be the newest word I've seen pop up everywhere is affirming.
Oh yeah.
I see it everywhere.
Hmm.
Neurodivergent affirming, meaning knowing what wordage to use. And I came across this. You've probably seen it on Facebook.
Hmm.
It's called the Neurodivergent Affirming Handbook.
Okay. Is that Sunny? What's their last name? Are they out of Australia? Do you know the
No,
name? Okay.
it's two women, both who have children. One who's got kids who are neurodivergent. She's neurodivergent. The other one is
Hmm.
neurodivergent, and they've both they're both coaches, and they've written this book,
Oh.
and they teach in their things like they teach you like what's the proper wordage instead of saying obsessed, you say
Mhm.
traits.
Okay.
They're teaching you the proper wordage, so it's not a negative term, it's more of a
Yeah.
positive term.
That's interesting. To me, I think language is an important part of neurodivergent affirming approaches. Like we do want to not pathologize all
Mhm.
autistic traits as being something wrong and bad that we have to fix. Um, but also for me, neurodivergent affirming is more than just how you talk about the thing. It's like your mindset and your approach of really understanding and integrating and realizing that having a neurodivergent brain is exactly as neutral as having a neuro typical brain is. That all brains are natural, normal, neutral constructions, and that we need to change what we're doing to uphold the like humanness of every single person. And so
Mhm.
like the words are important and the language is important, but I think it's also about meeting people where they really are and not judging people or shaming people or like expecting people should be behaving this way or doing this way or thinking this way, but instead looking at what they are doing and thinking and behaving and meeting them there and getting helping them self-direct where they want to go and supporting them to get where they want to go. So that's really interesting. I don't know that specific handbook. I
I
am
will
glad
send
to see that
I'll
more
send
stuff is
you a
coming
copy
out.
of it.
That would be cool, or just the name, and I can look
Yeah.
it up. Yeah, yeah,
What's interesting is I think the most important things they put in that book is a lot of people, when they hear the word neurodivergent, they only think autism or
yeah.
ADHD, but really it encompasses all disabilities.
Hmm. Yeah,
And people need to know that neurodivergent isn't just autism and ADHD, it's every disability it's an umbrella that encompasses it all.
it really does. And we've struggled with that just as coaches because we're, a business, we advertise. We don't advertise much, but like we have copy on our website and stuff that tries to describe what we do for folks. And most of the coaches who work with us are autistic ADHD, but we work with people who are post traumatic brain
Hmm.
injury, right? Who have had a concussion or stroke. We work with people who are bipolar, who are borderline personality, who are like, there's such a range, who are dyspraxic or dyslexic, right? Those are all forms of neurodivergence that are among the natural spectrum of human brains. Um, but I completely agree with you that there's something has happened where when we say neurodivergent, people think we mean autistic and maybe a little ADHD. Um, and it is really hard to, I don't know how to course correct that. I thought about that a lot just as somebody who's like, how do I write this paragraph on my website so it looks like it means what I mean? It means neurodivergent as a whole and not just autistic people. Though we do work with autistic people. It's really a challenge. It's been an interesting couple of years of that.
Now, from reading your website, you guys work on a sliding scale.
Mhm, we do.
Now, how does that sliding scale work?
Sure. So we work on a sliding scale because I'll just say because of wanting to support equity wherever we can. And we know that, first of all, a lot of disabled folks are um, on disability or are not able to work traditionally for full-time jobs. But also, especially as like a white coach who's, coming at this, I don't want to be requiring people to pay large amounts of money to build skills, especially if they are traditionally underserved populations or traditionally marginalized populations. So we work on a sliding scale, and basically the way it works is we present you with our scale, and you choose where on there you fall. So you're basically deciding on the scale, I want to pay this much per session, and we take you at your word. And what ends up happening is that people who have enough and are able to pay at the top of the scale support our ability to serve people towards the bottom of
Mm.
the scale. And I think it's one of those things that, like, if you are highly capitalistic, you're like, that would never work. But it does work. We've been doing it for several years. And it enables us to pay our coaches a living wage. I'm not going to say there aren't coaches out there who make more than we do. Like, sure, you can look at Tony Robbins or somebody, and they're making many tens of thousands of dollars per appearance. But just in terms of getting everybody paid at a living wage and making sure we're serving clients who need the services. That's how we do it, and it's worked really well for us. Yeah.
Now, how did you come up with the price range for the scale?
I looked at what coaches charge to start with, just as a broad range. So there's like, again, coaching is an industry where there's a broad price range. So newer coaches will often start, somewhere between 40 and 60. This is in the United States. It may be different in other places, but I'm US based, so I use US pricing. Um, Starter coaches often charge something like 40 to 60 per session. Coaches with many years of experience or high specialty will charge something like 200, 300, 500 and up per session. And we are specialists, but we're also, trying to make this affordable for people as best we can. And
Hmm.
it's also not covered by insurance, unfortunately. And most clients are not in a workplace where they can get funding for coaching. Like that, occasionally we contract with employers, but it's rarer. And so I tried to find a number that seemed like, um, so our lower range right now is 75 a session, and that's basically what it costs for us to pay your coach a living wage and also kind of onboard you, like the administrative expenses of like working with credit card processors and stuff like that. And then the high range is 200, and that's just a kind of random number that is a high range for a coach, but still within like a normal range. And then we do also have spots for people who can't afford, if you can't afford 75 a session, which is a lot of people, which is fair. We have a rotating fund. We have a Patreon that people are able to join to support the podcast, and all of those funds go to support people who are in the under 75 range. And so we can take a certain number of them a
Hmm.
month, which is really fantastic. And they just kind of cycle through, because the thing with coaching is we're teaching skills and then you're done. And you can come back and learn more skills if you want, but it's not like something where you're expected to be in coaching for years and years and years. You're there for 3 or 6 months, and then you've got what you need, hopefully, and you move on. And so we can support somebody for a couple months, get them what they need, they achieve the goal, and then we move on to the next person. And we're able that way to sort of um, keep serving people, which is really the goal, is to pay our coaches reasonably
Yeah.
and then serve the folks we're here to serve. So yeah, it's been a fun experiment. I won't say it hasn't been stressful at times, but it's really worked out better than I could have hoped. So
Well, I mean, that answers one of the questions is how do you deal with those who can't afford your pricing? And that's a great idea with the Patreon that you
yeah,
take that money and say, okay, well, this will help with pay for some of your sessions and get you what you need, and then you
exactly.
can go on your way. And if you need more, you can come
Yeah,
back.
yeah. And I will say that most clients want to pay us for our services. Most clients are really frustrated that you know, they don't feel like they have enough extra. And, often we will say, okay, well, if you can contribute $10 a session, then we can make up the rest from the Patreon funds. But if you can't, don't like, we're not trying to make people like, you
Mhm.
should eat first and pay for your
Yeah.
housing and stuff. But a lot of people do want to contribute even a small amount, and that helps us stretch the Patreon funds. And also it helps people with accountability. Because it is true that if you put your $5 in, you're more likely to do the work than, if we're giving you free services. So we try to find a line that feels comfortable for the client and that's client led, but that also enables us to, make our living and do our work. So,
That kind of reminds me of a vet show that used to be on air called Dr. Jeff, Rocky Mountain Vet, where
oh, I've seen YouTube clips of that. I haven't
yeah,
seen the
where
whole
he's
show.
got a funding jar for those who can't afford their services.
Hmm.
They take from that to
Yeah.
help those pay for their vets.
Hmm. Yeah. I'm in the Rocky Mountains, so I think that's one of the reasons it pops up on my Facebook feed sometimes. But yeah, you know, we looked when we started at being a nonprofit, and I have concerns about being a nonprofit for a couple reasons, but a lot of it is just that I don't know that that's using people's money to the best. Because when you become a nonprofit, you're beholden to all the people who fund you, and I get that. But I don't really want to be beholden to the people who fund me. I want to be able to fund me to be my clients. I want to be beholden to my clients. I want to make sure we're serving them the best we can. And so this is kind of the middle ground that we've found. That's it's still kind of a traditional business setup of you pay for the thing you get, um, but it allows people to pay their funds forward and for all the client funds to kind of be pooled to serve everybody equally, because everyone gets the same services no matter what you pay, right? It's not like the people who pay a top tier get better services or different services or anything
Mhm.
than the other people. So the pooling mechanism works really well for us, and I think it enables us to focus on our clientele in a way that other methods of setting up wouldn't have. So
Yeah. What is the age range you deal with?
our primary age range are young adults up to older adults. So anywhere from I just entered college up to people in their 60s, 70s. Anyone who's late identified really with any sort of neurodivergence. I do also offer parent coaching, so that in that case we're not working with children directly. Usually we're working with their parents. So sometimes we're um, interacting with younger children, right?
Mm.
Especially I'm our main parent coach, so it's usually me. Hello, hi. Um, and in that case, we're working with kiddos who are anywhere from baby on up to teenager. But it's usually through parent coaching where we're helping parents understand, um, neurodivergent behavior and communication styles, um, how to help kiddos uh, get access and accommodations at school or at work or whatever, how to set up routines or parenting styles that really suit the family and allow everybody to feel like they have autonomy over their own life, but also kids are getting done what they need to get done and parents are getting done what they need to get done, that kind of stuff. Um, so a lot in that case, it's a lot more like communication coaching or sometimes just educational um, than traditional coaching is. Yeah.
All right.
So.
What are some of the struggles you see your clients deal with?
Oh wow, that's a good one. Um, Everybody thinks that they're the only one in the world with a problem, and I have learned so quickly that that is never ever true. If you are dealing with a problem, we have met 10 other people who are dealing with the same problem. I think the most common things people come in with are just I've just got identified and I'm freaking out kind of feeling, which is pretty normal. But also people come in with challenges around, I guess I would label them basic life skills, which are things like I can't keep my dishes clean, I can't keep my house clean, I can't get up in the morning. Uh, Hygiene is really hard. Like the sensory challenges of the toothbrush and the toothpaste and the bath water and stuff is really hard. Um, I'm having trouble remembering to take my meds or refill my meds, or you know, um, I budgeting problems, excessive spending, those kinds of things. And they're almost always executive function challenges, I guess is the big bucket. It's
Mhm.
just that people don't, I think, aren't generally educated about what executive function is and why it's a challenge for a lot of neurodivergent people. Um, Kind of broadly, not just autistic ADHD neurodivergent people, but whole piles of neurodivergent people and neurotypical people. So I think that's the broad range. We have a little check mark on our form now where you can say, oh, you're here for executive function coaching, because such a common challenge for people to like create a life that works for them and that they're getting the stuff done that they need to live like happily and calmly and roughly having things together. So, yeah.
I mean, that's one of the biggest keywords you hear when you're dealing with ASD, ADHD,
Mhm.
is executive functioning.
Yeah.
Well, let's define that for
Sure.
people so they know what it is. What exactly is executive functioning and how does it affect us?
Yeah. So so I just want to say that I'm going to be really reductive about it for the sake of getting it in a podcast because you could write books about it. So,
Hmm.
but the best way I think to think of it is um, if you think of when you go to the doctor and there's a receptionist, right? You know how you go to the doctor, there's a receptionist, she answers the phone, she organizes, she sends you where you need to go, she keeps track of everything, she prioritizes. That's your executive function. It's right at the front of your brain, prefrontal cortex, and it prioritizes, organizes, it's responsible for emotion regulation. So being able to identify and then like use your emotions appropriately in the situation. um, and lots of other things, time management skills, time awareness is part of executive function. Uh, Working memory, which is your ability to hold information in your head from, say, one room to the next room. I need to go get a spoon, and then remembering that all the way to the drawer and actually retrieving the spoon and then remembering what the spoon was for. That's all working memory. That's executive function. And there's a couple of other things in there as well. Um, so when we say that a lot of neurodivergent people have executive function challenges, what we mean is that, and I can speak for myself too, I'm time blind. If I don't have timers set, I don't know what time it
Hmm.
is, and I don't know how long something is taken, and I don't know how to plan how long something will take. I need scaffolding and external supports to help me with that. My working memory is very poor. If I look at something and look away, I can't remember what I just saw. So I need supports to help me like keep stuff in my head for longer or to just have it not in my head. Um, there's lots of other kinds of challenges. Hygiene, sensory stuff, is a big one that's not executive function, excuse me. But most of the challenges that people come in with in terms of organizing their lives, making sure they're eating on time, drinking on time, brushing their teeth, having their pills, those are all executive function. Like you need to know what you're going to do, how to do it, and actually go do it. That's executive function. So, in a nutshell, yeah. And a
Well,
lot of people have a lot of struggles with it. It's pretty normal.
now, what is a typical day like for you?
I don't have a typical day. I wish I did. So I'm also a homeschooling parent or an unschooling parent. My children didn't do well in traditional school systems, and so we pulled them, and we're in Colorado, so we do a form of homeschooling. So some days I am kind of with my kids full time. I'm our stay-at-home parent. I'm responsible for all the household admin and getting people's doctor's appointments and doing grocery shopping and stuff like that. And then other days, I am working with clients directly. I am writing up client notes. I'm working on courses. We have like do it yourself courses for folks who are not ready for one on one coaching but need help with a specific skill. So I write those and I record them and I put them up. I work on podcast production. We have the Neurodivergent podcast, which goes out a couple times a month, and I'm responsible for those. And then often we are working with group coaching clients live. So we have the Patreon, we have accountability groups twice a week, our body doubling groups, co-working groups, however you want to call those. We do group coaching live sessions. We do parent support groups. We do um, what else? Lots of other lots of other things. There's a lot going on in neurodiverging. Um, and sometimes we're running our 6-week groups. We have two, one for parents and one for newly identified, mostly neurodivergent adults that run a couple times a year, that are live, mix of education and peer support and live coaching support. Um, so I'm always doing something, but it varies a lot on what that is, whether it's, I'm having a video day or I'm doing a writing day or I'm with my kids.
No.
Yeah, it's
Now,
always good stuff.
now, when you deal with individuals to families, do you change how you work between the two? Or is it somewhere similar or where they kind of overlap what you bring from one to the other?
I think there's a lot of skills that are transferable. With family coaching, with parent coaching, and there's a lot of single parents out there, but often I'm working with 2 or more parents, and they might have different communication styles. The relationship might be in good shape or not so good shape. And so there's a lot more communication coaching, deep listening practice, active listening practice, and then some more education around like what's actually normal for neurodivergent kids, because a lot of people have these expectations, even for neurotypical kids, that are like completely unreasonable, like expecting 8-year-olds to do things that 16-year-olds sometimes can't do, you know. And so sometimes it's just educating parents, like, actually it sounds like what your 4-year-old is doing is totally within the range of normal for a 4-year-old, and you know, you don't necessarily need to be worried about that. With individual coaching with adults, a lot of what we're doing is there's a little bit of education and of explaining to people that actually what they're going through is pretty normal and they're not alone in it, and you know, helping them find other support. But a lot of it is mindset. A lot of it is that we have struggled for so long, many of us, without an identifier or a diagnosis, and we've internalized this idea that we're just sort of useless. Like, we try so hard and we can't get stuff done.
Hmm.
We look around and we see other people succeeding and we feel like we're not succeeding, and we've internalized that this is like a personal failing of ours. And actually it's not. It's just you don't have the skills you need to succeed, or you do and you're not seeing that you're able to do things because people are telling you that you're failing. And so it's really challenging, but it's a lot of mindset work. It's a lot of noticing where actually are you doing pretty well. You know, when you've handled challenges in the past, how have you succeeded over those, and can you apply that forward? Are the expectations other people are putting on you, especially like your parents or your partners or those kinds of things, reasonable expectations, right? Or are they not? And that kind of work can be really, it sounds kind of obvious when I'm just explaining it, but that kind of work can be really transformational for people. Just to recognize that they do have places where they're doing really well and they have huge strengths, and just applying those forward instead of focusing on all the things they can't do can be really valuable. Yeah.
Now, have you had parents who won't recognize that their son is autistic and the son's sitting there trying to get it across to him, I'm autistic. I'm not lazy, I'm
Yeah.
autistic.
I usually get the opposite. Honestly, I get parents who are confident that their child is ADHD or autistic or whatever, and kiddo is resistant to that identifier. Often just because it's scary. Like, it's scary to have an identification with something that you're
Hmm.
not familiar with. And there's so much stigma against, especially autism, but also other types of neurodivergence, that I can understand why somebody who's not familiar, who's never like met out autistic people, doesn't really want to associate with, like, we're awesome, but they don't know that. So um sometimes parents are resistant to the idea, like they're okay with their kid being like autistic, for example, but the idea that an autistic person will have these challenges and that is normal is really hard. So it's not like the label, it's the for example, you just said lazy, right? Like, so explaining to a parent that actually executive function is a part of dysfunction, is a part of autism, and that's normal, and it doesn't mean the kid's lazy, is is more often what's going to happen than like a rejection of the autism, right? Um, and a lot of parents are concerned about their kids like using their autism as an excuse, which I say in huge scare quotes, right? Or using their
Hmm.
disability as an excuse to get out of things. And it's like, you know, some kids might actually, yeah, not take out the trash because they're they don't want to. But also mostly it's not an excuse, and trying to educate them on that. But kids always do the best they can. Like, that's the thing. Even kids with huge behavioral challenges have those behavioral challenges because they're trying to do the best they can, and no one's like noticing how hard they're working. Um, and so I think parents do better when they recognize that. Yeah.
Now, you've got programs that you've been working on.
Mhm.
Let's talk about some of those programs and what they kind of offer for those out there.
Sure. We have lots of things. I'm really excited about how many things we've been able to do in a short period of time because my coaches are amazing. Um, One very cool thing that we just started offering with my colleague, her name is Dr. Rabia Supani, and she's not a coach with me, but she's a neurodivergent psychologist. And we put together a program for professionals and coaches, other coaches and healthcare workers who are trying to learn about, as we were talking about earlier, about neurodiversity affirming practice. And so that's a really cool thing we just started offering, is a certification on becoming a neurodiversity affirming healthcare or coach practitioner. So that's available. But then for like individual folks, we have, for example, courses on creating visual supports for adults. So when we were talking about executive function, a lot of executive function challenges for us can be supported by creating visual supports, whether they're to-do lists or picture schedules or social stories or all sorts of things. And so we have a course that people can take at their own leisure up about that. We have courses on supporting mindfulness. We have courses on beating procrastination. We have a very good one that I'm very proud of on alexithymia, which is very, very common for especially autistics, but also other neurodivergent folks, which is the inability to sort of describe your feelings or to understand what you're feeling. And I'm alexithymic, so it's something that's close to me. So that's available. And then we also have live courses that we run periodically. We run a 6-week course. It's like a course program, self-help support called From Defeated to Inspired, which is for mostly late identified autistic people who are feeling really overwhelmed and need some like supportive kicks in the butts and tactics to use to like get stuff together, like create supports for themselves, figure out what accommodations they need, and take back control. And then we also have a collaborative parenting 6-week program, which is for parents of neurodivergent kiddos who are struggling with like quote unquote challenging behaviors, like who are seeing behaviors that they're not sure how to address or handle in a kind, authentic, gentle parenting sort of way. And collaborative parenting is a really good model for most neurodivergent kiddos in that it supports their autonomy and their independence. And so that's what we teach. Yeah. So we have lots of things going on.
I see you have a course called Get Out of Your Head.
Yeah, that's the visual supports course.
Let's talk a
Yeah,
little bit about that and how it helps those of us.
sure. So I think I talked about this briefly when we were talking about executive function, but a lot of our executive function challenges are that you're not supposed to be able to do anything. You're a human and you're how you're supposed to be. But neurotypical people or people without executive functioning challenges, can often carry a lot of information in their heads and retrieve it relatively quickly. Neurodivergent people have lots of other brain strengths, but our working memory tends to be poorer, and our ability to like remember from minute to minute what we're supposed to be doing is usually not as great. And so the Get It Out of Your Head course is a visual supports course where we're explaining executive function in more detail. We're showing you exactly what executive function encompasses and doesn't, so you can identify like where your strengths are and where your weaknesses might be. And then if you do have executive dysfunction weaknesses, we're giving you tactics you can use to get things out of your head and into some other container that will help you with it. So that can be things like visual supports. That can be things like alarms that remind you to prompt you to do things, playlists that end at a certain time, so you have to transition to a new task, right? There's lots of different mechanisms and strategies you can use, but basically to literally get stuff out of your brain and into other containers that will help you do the thing. So you're not forgetting to eat or use the bathroom or take a shower or meet your partner or pick up your kids, right? Or whatever it is. And that can be really, really helpful for a lot of clients, which is why we made a course about it. Usually once I am sort of tired of telling people the same thing over and over and over again, I make a course about it. So that's how you know that a lot of people need this material, right? So
How, when you're dealing with a client who's got executive function problems, what kind of strategies do you use to work with them? Especially like I know with executive functioning, a lot of it is planning, a
mhm.
lot of it is time. What kind of strategies do you use to help them figure it out?
Yeah. The first thing when a client comes in is they will have either written out or spoken out some of the challenges they're having. So I'll have some information about what's going on for them. And usually we'll start sort of from the top of what is your highest priority or the thing that is messed up the most that would make the most difference to you if we fixed it, right? And sometimes that's like getting to work late and they want to get there on time, or they're messing up date night with their significant other or whatever it is. And we look at what are the things that are blocking this. And sometimes it is a very practical challenge, like they need more transition time built into their calendar, or they're literally forgetting and they needed to set an alarm, right? Sometimes
Mhm.
it's very easy, like um they not easy in the sense of they should have thought of it themselves, but easy in the sense of they just sort of need a trigger, right, to do the thing. Sometimes and very often I think people have emotional blocks that
Hmm.
it's scary to do the thing. And what if maybe going to work is anxiety provoking? What you might have to talk to your boss. You might have to take the bus and you don't like, something sensorially about the bus. Or maybe um, you're worried you're going to get fired. And so you avoid the whole thing by not going to work, which doesn't make rational sense, but it makes sort of emotional sense in our brains.
Mhm.
And emotional blocks are a big part of coaching, is helping folks, first of all, figure out if they're having an emotional block, figure out what's causing that block, and then identifying where we do have control. So we might not have control over the bus, but we might be able to bring a sensory kit with us. We might be able to afford an Uber or ask for accommodations from work to come in later so we could take a different bus, right? And so taking your feelings seriously as indicators of something wrong or right, right? Sometimes feelings tell us that something is working really well. But if you're avoiding, right? If you're procrastinating, sometimes that's an emotional block. And we need to take that emotion seriously and look at what's causing that. And can we flip it so you feel better about the thing? And then you'll be more likely to do the thing, right? So executive function is sometimes, we need to set a timer, but sometimes it's dealing with anxiety or fear or stress or shame, that will open you up to being able to do the thing.
Now, how do you deal with a client who's got severe like procrastination issues, who like just keeps putting stuff off and off and
Yeah.
off until it's like almost at the due date and then they just panic?
Oh, that's so common. So like so amazingly common. And it really depends because even though one thing that's kind of really cool, and one thing I really like about this job actually is even though people present with what looks like the same problem, it's all different problems. So you really have to be sort of a investigator and figure out what's going on. Um, Now, sometimes people procrastinate because they are ADHD brains, and ADHD brains don't get enough dopamine throughout their day,
Mhm.
and their brains just can't access or produce enough. And so they're using the deadline to give themselves dopamine. And in that case, that's an indicator to me that we need to be giving you more dopamine spread out throughout your day. So you don't need to use this deadline as an adrenaline rush to get your dopamine, right? That you can give yourself more dopamine throughout. And so we might work on figuring out what makes you happy, right? Can you take a couple minutes every day to text a friend, look at your fish, take a walk, whatever gives you, that kind of thing. Sometimes procrastination is avoidance of a difficult emotion, right? If I write the paper, I'm going to have to be judged for the paper. And I'm scared of being judged, whether I get a good grade or a bad grade, right? I'm scared of
Mhm.
that. What if, you know? And then dealing with okay, so let's grapple with that fear. Like, okay, so what does happen if you get a good grade? What are you worried will be the result of that? And can we get in front of that? What happens if you get a bad grade? What are you worried will be the result of that? Can we get in front of that? Right? Um, Procrastination can be caused by a lot of different challenges, and it's often layered, like there's multiple things going on, but you kind of just pick it at one thing at a time, and eventually you figure out all the blocks and you clear them, and people have fewer problems. Not to say they're never going to procrastinate again, but we can like bring it down to once a week instead of 6 times a week, so
And finally, how can we find out more about you and your practice?
for sure. I'm at neurodivergent.com, and that's the main way to find me. So our podcast is there. We have blog posts, we have lots of free resources, and then obviously the coaching and the courses and everything are also there. And then you can also find us at patreon.com/neurodiverging, which gives you like perks and hot seat coaching and uh, body doubling group and those kinds of things. And the money goes to support our lower income uh, clients, as we talked about earlier in the podcast. So we appreciate your support there as well.
And that's it, everybody. That was Danielle Sullivan. I'm Reed Miles, and I'll see you in the next one.